Hello world and welcome back to Architectural History 2. This lecture will cover Chapter 17, 1890 through 1920. At the turn of the 20th century, not everyone welcomed such Beaux-Arts piles as the White City built at the Chicago Expo of 1893. The influence of art critic John Ruskin, who reviled the classical orders, extended far beyond the mid-19th century Gothic revival. He condemned the moral decline of industrial society, which denied the satisfaction of craft to the worker. The arts and crafts movement in England reached maturity during the last 2 decades of the 19th century. Architects attempted to free themselves from historical high styles by emulating vernacular buildings. Planners, inspired by Ebenezer Howard's theory of controlled urban growth, organized garden cities as the alternative to the sprawling industrial metropolis. The movement found its voice in the 1860s with William Morris, who declared art is mankind's expression of his joy in labor. The Red House signaled the revival of regionalist vernacular sympathies, sometimes called the English Freestyle. This in Bexley Heath, London, Red House, Philip Webb, 1860. Edwin Lutyens 1869 through 1944, the most successful architect to emerge from the freestyle of the arts and crafts milieu, was also the first to betray it. He considered Beaux-Arts more appropriate for public commissions. Lutyens collaborated with landscape designer Gertrude Jekyll on her house. In Godalming, England, Moonstead Wood, Edwin Lutyens, and Gertrude Jekyll, 1896. The Scottish architect Charles Rene Mackintosh, 1868 through 1928, also came from the arts and crafts. This image of the Glasgow School of Arts by Charles Rene Mackintosh, 1897 to 1907, and the detail entrance of the facade. This image of Port Sunlight, England, Arts and Crafts Housing, Grayson and Ould, 1896. The English arts and crafts movement had a strong appeal to German designers. Theodor Fischer was one of the first modern architects to use rational system of concrete construction, seen in this high school at Elisabethplatz, Munich. Elisabethplatz High School, Theodor Fischer, 1902. This image, or photographs actually, of AEG Turbine Hall by Peter Behrens, 1908, and the interior of that. Cologne, Germany, Werkbund Exhibition, Glass Pavilion, Bruno Taut, 1914. The arts and crafts movement held great appeal for Frank Lloyd Wright, circa 1867 through 1959. He used the craftsman's ethic, I think that's supposed to be aesthetic, but ethic in his early houses. The Wright House and Studio in Oak Park, 1889, a suburb of Chicago, contained typical craftsman features such as bow windows, steep gables, a fireplace with an ingle nook, built-in cupboards and benches, and stained glass windows. In Buffalo, New York, the Larkin Company Administration Building exterior by Frank Lloyd Wright, 1904. The interior image depicted below it is the atrium for the secretarial pool. Unity Temple by Frank Lloyd Wright, 1904, in Oak Park, Chicago, or Oak Park, Illinois. The image at the bottom is the interior. Notice the same use of the fixture, or similar use of the fixture from the previous slide. Wright's design breakthrough came at the turn of the century with a series of houses done in the prairie style, characterized by horizontal volumes, low-pitched roofs, and deep eaves. This image of Hyde Park, Chicago, of the Roby House with wide projecting eaves, Wright, 1906 through 1909, and the interior image below it. Stickley's craftsman promoted the modest bungalow type, a small house surrounded with verandas, as the ideal American home. He frequently published examples built by the Green brothers. Pasadena, California, Gamble House, Green and Green, 1907. And again, I think this is an appropriate reference. This is the house that was in Back to the Future with Marty McFly and Doc Brown. Berkeley, California, First Church of Christ Scientist, Bernard Maybeck, 1909. Carmel, California, Asilomar Conference Center, Julia Morgan, 1913 through 1930. Beautiful open web truss. Russian River, California, Winetune Bear House, Maybeck and Morgan, 1902 through 1930s. San Simeon, California, Hearst Castle, Twin Bell Towers, Morgan, 1919 through 1940. Twilight of Western Imperialism, Monuments to the White Man's Burden. Colonial architects created their boldest expressions during the first 3 decades of the 20th century. The Victoria Memorial at Calcutta is by William Emerson, 1906 through 1921. Colonial designers attempted to synthesize European building types with Indo-Saracenic style. In Madras, the students of the local art school reproduced Orientalist details on the Western institutional buildings. Madras, India, Victoria Memorial Hall, today Chennai National Museum, Henry Irwin, 1906 through 1909. In New Delhi, access to the Viceroy's house on the left, Edwin Lutyens, Herbert Baker, 1920. Modern French colonialism began in 1830 with the seizing of Algeria, followed by the absorption of Tunisia in 1880 and the annexation of Morocco during the first decade of the 20th century. The Algiers port embankments and boulevard with porticos that imitate the Rue de Rivoli, Charles Frederick Henri Chasseret, 1860s. Jean Eugene Formaggio, 1822 through 1897, designed the first major church of the Algerian colonists, Notre Dame d'Afrique, in 1858 through 1872. A synthesis of local and European styles reached maturity in Casablanca in the administration buildings constructed in the early 1920s around the Place Administrative. Casablanca Post Office, Adrien Laforge, 1920. Art Nouveau, the search for modern form, architecture without precedents. Louis Fuller, protagonist of the Whiplash aesthetic, 1900. Eiffel Tower, Maurice Koechlin, 1889. Obviously designed by Gustave Eiffel. Galerie des Machines, Charles Toutet and Victor Contaminin, 1889. Paris, Metro Station, Hector Guimard, 1900. The Art Nouveau movement emerged in rebellion to academic approaches in design. The stem-like cast iron awnings installed in 1900 at the Paris metro stations, their lamps like sprouting buds, their graphics like sinuous tendrils, expressed the dynamic spirit of the new style. The Parisian offices, Georges Chadin, 1903. Most of Art Nouveau's adherents were sincere believers in socialism and social reform. Henri Sauvage developed a new apartment typology, the Gardens, or the vertical setback block. Rue Varavine Gardens, or vertical setbacks, Henri Sauvage, 1912. Ljubljana, Slovenia National Library, Jos Plenic, 1930. Prague, which was still reluctantly part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the beginning of the 20th century, became the center of a peculiar movement in the applied arts and architecture, roughly based on the Cubism of Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. These are the Neclevano apartments, Joseph Chokol, 1913. In the Netherlands, Heinrich Berlage led the Dutch search for new language of architectural expression. With the Koopmansbeurs Stock Exchange, built in Amsterdam from 1898 to 1903, he provoked an anti-academic trend. Berlage influenced the attitudes of the next generation of designers who participated in building one of the world's first extensive programs of social housing. The most inventive among them, Michel de Clercq, aspired the personalized designs of the English arts and crafts. The social housing estate, Michel de Clercq, 1914 through 1920. By far the strongest regional variation of Art Nouveau occurred in the turn of the century Barcelona. Sagrada Familia, although begun by Francesc de Paula de Villar y Lozano, was taken over the following year by his young assistant, Antonio Gaudí. Between 1905 and 1907, Gaudí brought his passion for undulating surfaces to the climax in the Casa Mila, a large apartment complex on one of the most prominent corners of Ensanche. Then the plan for the same apartment building where no right angle is used anywhere. In the late 19th century Vienna, the use of the word modern acquired an entirely different meaning. Herr Otto Wagner, 1841 through 1918, who had worked with the leading eclectic architects of the Ringstrasse, attempted in the early 1890s to create a style suited to the changes of modern life. The Karlsplatz station, Otto Wagner, 1898. In line with Wagner's demand for a modern break from academic styles, the Secession House differed from the Art Nouveau love of undulating lines and irregular spaces. It was an orthogonal and symmetrical as classical temple, with stylized foliage clustered into squared-off shapes at the junctures of the facade. 1898. Viennese architect and critic Aldo Fluss reduced the language of his houses to white plastered boxes with few apertures, such as the 1926 Müller House in Prague. In 1910, Luce built his most prominent essay in restraint, the Goldman and Salisch store, now known as Luce House. 1909.